a sword. Kadesh Yisrom Shin Anoshin. So they'll think you're male and leave you alone. The same thing. There was a beautiful woman. She was on the road with her husband traveling on business. And she took a shekel belonged to someone else and turned it into a beard. On her face, and that's how she was saved. And I want to emphasize, all these are from Jews. Right? So travel once upon a time was, as I said before, extremely challenging, which is why in the Middle Ages, in France, Jews didn't wear yarmulkes at all, even in shul. Got, the customs of the road spread to the Jewish community, not the other way around. Rabbis, yeshiva bachurim, and people whose business kept them entirely in the Jewish community had a beard and a yarmulke and things like that. The regular person out there, the balabatim, who were on the road usually for weeks or certainly for days, and would come back only on Shabbos, when they're back in the Jewish community even, they still often are wearing, when I say hergel nasateva, that when you get used to becomes natural, they're still wearing the other clothes. The Ozerua, who was one of the famous German from Vienna, Ashkenazi rabbis, one of the big poskim in the Middle Ages, talks about Hakolim in Yeshiva, can you count a katan for giving a leon on Shabbos? And he says, Tzarchli Zarshli Yikor Be'eter Rosh Megillah. Well, maybe you can give him a leon, but he's got to wear a yarmulke. Nowadays, it's like, I guess you're wearing a hat, right? You're wearing a jacket. That's the question, wearing a yarmulke. Kishem Alach Yishem Sefta Sofrim, because there's a discussion in the Sefta Sofrim whether you can wear, whether you have to wear a yarmulke or not when you're in shul. The Esher Kriz HaTorah Kan Tanmer. The Ein Year, the Ein Nine Minute Rabbi Sina Shabbat Sofos. He says, I don't like the way the rabbis do in France. He's talking about the time of Rashi and the Tosafos. Shematir Levarach Rosh Megillah. They can go to shul and get an aliyah, Rosh Megillah. Without yarmulke. Then you deal with Kaimon Hagan. I don't know where it comes from. You look at Das Tanakam Shem Sefta Sofrim. And this is from Rabbi Yosef's shouts to his response, and he wants to make the argument, that the current custom, of which he disapproves, that unmarried girls do not cover their hair, and he says that's terrible. So, and the Ashkenazim do it. He says the Beis Yaakov system, I don't know where they're coming from, and he says it must be that it's a leftover from the Middle Ages when people didn't cover their hair. It's very interesting. All this brings into relief the differences that happen when you start with the emancipation, and all of a sudden it's trains, it's law and order, it's a different world, or is it? I have, as I indicated you, 4 stories, which bring into relief, as I said, we're encountering the other, discovering the self-servant. First one has to do with Sigmund Freud, right? As you see, one of his most famous works, right? One of his most famous works is Jokes in Relation to Unconscious, which he treats jokes as something serious. Okay, why do you say what you say? Sigmund Freud, very interesting figure. Obviously, one of the most famous Jews in history. A person who hated Judaism, had major issues with it. I mean, really major issues with it. His father, he was born in Moravia in a small town, Freiburg, and early they moved to Vienna. The grandfather was a Galiciana, and the father was, you know how it goes. The grandfather was very religious. The father was, and by the time you get to Sigmund Freud, it's 0. Not only 0, but anti. And now, mind you, I'm not saying that he was anti-Semitic, but he was very strongly anti-Judaic. He had real problems with the Torah and with Jewish religion. Isaiah Berlin, famous philosopher, writes that when he was in 1938, when Sigmund Freud ran away at old age from the Anschluss, that Hitler came in and took over Austria, and he relocated to London. So Isaiah Berlin, this young guy who was a little bit religious, goes to visit him, and Mrs. Sigmund Freud comes out, and it's Friday night, by the way, and Mrs. Sigmund Freud comes out, and she's still complaining. They've been married for 50 years, and she's still complaining. She says, every Jewish woman wants to light the candles on Shabbos night, but this monster forbids it. And Sigmund Freud says, I do forbid it. Religion is superstition. This is the guy who's into interpersonal relations. Well, I can tell you, I told this to someone today, and they were all horrified. They said, no, Sigmund Freud was really a wonderful Jew. I mean, I'm not religious, of course, but he ever had positive feelings about Jews. They just don't know. You see? Because many of the biographers are either not Jewish or Jews who have no connection whatsoever to Jewish tradition, and these kind of issues skirt by them.